Hey, welcome to the Dr. Jimbo Love Show featuring Seth Matthew. And we are here today, Saturday at Brothers Bar and Grill in the mezzanine section at the shops at Northfield.
Pretty much the hottest section at Brothers.
Absolutely, it is. It's definitely the busiest. Now, how is our line forming over there? Well, we've got a couple people waiting to come up, but we'll get them in here at 11 when we open. So last night, Seth, we had some pretty good girls basketball, women's basketball.
Phenomenal.
I'm not going to call it girls basketball because these ladies play like better than some of the men's teams. I'm telling you. South Carolina ended up playing against Louisville, and we had Stanford match up against UConn.
Yeah, and UConn was the 2 seed there.
Yes, UConn was you don't normally see that.
It was 1-1-1-2, and UConn's been here forever. I mean, UConn's program is just phenomenal.
Yep.
Always making it back every year.
Well, this is going to be their 12th final game appearance, championship game appearance. Their record is 11-0 under Gino Ariano. Armano. I have the hardest time saying his name. But yeah, so they're in a really good spot, a spot that I don't think they actually anticipated being. Stanford was well favored in this game.
Yep.
And especially with UConn, one of their best players ended up breaking her wrist and was unable to compete.
Well, the crazy thing about women's basketball, there is a huge drop-off in talent when you go from the number 1 seeds down below. A 1-2 matchup. For example, we have Duke in the men's sitting at a 2 seed against a 9 North Carolina, and there's a 4-point spread. And you have the women's, a 1-2 matchup, and I believe it was a 9-point spread before the game took off.
Yeah, it was sizable. And, UConn battled well. I mean, of course, they came off a victory over NC State. It was a double overtime victory in order to get to the Final Four. And Stanford, of course, beat Texas 59-50, kind of got in there. But Stanford had everybody returning from a team that basically won it last year. It was the defending champions. South Carolina played against Creighton, beat them really handily, 80-50 to get into their qualifying game. And Louisville beat Michigan 62-50. A little bit about the Stanford-UConn game first. We'll start with that one. And really, with Stanford, you had the two twins, the Hull twins, that are from Spokane, Washington. And I had a chance to read an article about their career. They had a phenomenal high school career. They lost one game in their last 3 years together. And unfortunately, these two women did not have a good game last night, scoring 3 and 4 points respectively. And I have to think that if they had played their normal ball game, we would have seen Stanford probably beat UConn.
Yeah. I mean, I'm glad they did it. I mean, I think Paige Bucher from UConn is probably one of my favorite players in the tournament.
Yes.
Minus the woman from Iowa that has been making headlines throughout the whole season. But Paige Bucher is getting a lot of praise right now. She's getting compared to Diana Taurasi, which is one of the Hall of Fame players that's got to go down with women's basketball.
Oh, I think so. I think that Diana Taurasi would be, in my career watching women's basketball, you have Kim Mulkey, okay, who was the phenomenal guard from the early 80s squads. And then you have Diana Taurasi and Sue Bird, of course. You can't forget about her either. Just some wonderful, wonderful players. And you were talking about she ended up with 14 points and 5 assists in the game and had her teammate Williams with another 10 points.
Yeah, I think the good thing about this UConn team, and especially since they made it back this far, they made it to the finals, they have 3 seniors on the team and that are starters, and that plays a big role in it. Experience is always comes into factor when it goes into these tournaments. We look at the men's side where Miami had all 4th and 5th year seniors.
Super seniors.
Made it almost all the way to the end until Kansas knocked them off. But that team was sitting at a 10 seed. But seniority does play a factor in these big games. And I think UConn seniors really bailed them out this game. They really pulled it together. The points for this UConn team are all spread out. When you go with 14 is what Paige Bucher led them with.
Yep.
And what did they end up getting in that game?
They ended up scoring 63 points. It was 63-58 was the final score.
Yeah, so you look at that means the points were spread out between the players, especially if Paige was leading them with 14 points.
They were.
So
They
you're
were
not
very-
leading with just one person, which
Nope.
is huge at this stage.
Nope. And Stanford, you had Brink with 15.7 rebounds and Jones with 20 points and 11 rebounds. Not enough for the Stanford Cardinal to pull past UConn. So we're going to see Gino Arrieta versus Dawn Staley. And we're going to talk a little bit about the South Carolina and Louisville game, which was. And when I watched this game, basically it looked like South Carolina was just taking their time, pressing a little bit on the accelerator when they needed to. They jumped off to a 13-4 lead and never really looked back. They pulled it within about 6 points at the end of the third quarter. But, Aliyah Boston, 23 points, 18 boards. She's the National Player of the Year in the women's NCAA. And there were 4 more Gamecocks that were in double figures, but they were between 10 and 12 points. So you had really even scoring. And remember, at University of South Carolina, this team is stacked.
Yep.
Dawn Staley has 11 McDonald's All-Americans on this roster. And a freshman that's playing just out of her mind as well. Louisville, Cochran, and Smith had 14 points respectively. Angstler ended up with 18 points, but just not enough. Not enough to beat the talent of South Carolina. South Carolina put on a press and just pulled away from them and really actually made them just look kind of, I don't want to say ridiculous, but just beat them very well.
Yeah, and I'm rooting for UConn in this one, but I know South Carolina's most likely going to
You're
win
rooting
this.
for UConn? How can you go against my Gamecocks?
Well, then you have Victoria Saxon, who's the other forward on this team. That's with Aaliyah Boston. They dominate the board. They dominate the inside.
Right.
And honestly, they have size over pretty much any team in the NCAA for women's college basketball, and that plays a huge factor in this one. South Carolina is a team that's been dominant over the years. Probably the last 5 have been up there
Big time.
for winning a title, even though that hasn't turned out that way every single year.
Yep.
But to put it in perspective, I watched UConn play in I believe it was the SEC championship game, and they lost to Kentucky. Shouldn't have been a shock. I mean, Kentucky is a great program and everything. But I was honestly just sitting there being like, wow, I can't believe South Carolina lost, because I'm so used to seeing them win. Their bigs are dominant.
Yep.
I mean, as much as I like Paige Bucher, I just don't think they have enough. I think South Carolina, unfortunately, and it's kind of bad for viewership, I think they win by over 20 in this game.
No, I think they win big too.
Yeah.
South Carolina is 34-2. So that one loss you're talking about with South Carolina, you're talking about South Carolina losing to Kentucky?
It's in the conference championship.
Okay, yes. That was a very,
In overtime.
if anything, that was a wake-up call. And sometimes you see this. Now, we're going to look, and we'll talk a little bit about this when we look at the Duke team that we're going to be talking about later in the Final Four. They lost a really stinging loss to North Carolina the last game of the season on Coach K night. Now, sometimes when you have a team like this and you have a loss right before you go into a tournament, it's the thing that really sobers you up. And it makes you realize how, hey, if you lose again, your season's over. So let's see what happens. And, South Carolina, they were talking about it on ESPN today. They something woke them up.
Yep.
And as you can see, the way they handled Crichton, they beat them by 30 points. I think they could have beaten Louisville last night if they would have been playing at all ends of the court and playing, instead of playing in spurts, playing a consistent game, probably by 20.
Well, and the crazy thing about South Carolina is with Aaliyah Boston sitting at the forward, with Victoria Saxon down low, and don't get me wrong, their guards are great.
Yep.
I didn't expect them to lose a game this year, and the fact that they lost 2 was shocking to me.
Yeah.
So I don't see them getting the 3rd loss in the championship. I see this just being South Carolina dominant. I hope Paige Bucher has a good game. Hats off to her. She was injured for part of the season.
Yep.
She came back and really brought life back into this UConn team, because I believe she came back. It had to be right before the tournament.
Just recently, yes, it is. And, South Carolina lost last year in the Final Four, and it was such a painful loss for South Carolina. They haven't forgotten that. So,
and that's the thing. We got to talk about how losses feel. I mean, we're going to talk about it in the men's, but it goes for women's sports too.
Oh, just as
These
much.
players don't have a short memory. They remember what happened to them. It doesn't matter if it's a year ago. When these people come back, they remember what team took them out. So if you get to play again, it's just going to be a completely different team, a team with passion, a team with energy, a team playing on emotion.
Yes, and we saw that. So we don't want to forget it, but the Frozen Four, and it's easy to forget that they're not playing this weekend. They actually take a weekend off, and the tournament will resume in Boston on the 7th of April.
Which is great. How many Eastern teams are there?
It looks like there's 0 Eastern teams. There's nobody from the ECAC, and there's nobody from really any other conference except for the Midwestern teams.
Yeah, which is, I mean, it's not expected. 'Cause, I mean, UMass has put up a hell of a fight the last couple of years, and you also always get Boston University will always, every once in a while, make a run. Quinnipiac, they've done their thing over the last couple of years. I don't remember if they've won a title of recent.
They haven't. I was just looking at the national champions just before we came on the air. Quinnipiac has not won anything in recent memory.
Yeah.
Duluth has won a lot lately, and,
Yep.
and DU has won a bunch because they've won 3 since 2004. 2004, 2005, 2017. Duluth won in, I think, 13, and a couple more times between 13 and now. So, but the first game, let's talk about our Quinnipiac and talk a little bit about Michigan, who ended up pulling this game out 7-4. Michigan was up 4-0, and the goalie was pulled a little early,
Yep.
according to a lot of fans. And with 4 minutes left, Quinnipiac pulled their goalie, and boom, 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 we end up with a 7-4 ball game.
See, my hat's off to Quinnipiac's coach, because here's the thing. He played like Patrick Waugh. Patrick Waugh, when he was in control of the Avalanche, he was pulling our goalie in the second period. He was just doing ridiculous stuff, and it worked out, and he looked like a genius. And that's kind of the risk he ran. It was 4-0. They came back, made it 4-3, and all of a sudden he pulls his goalie with 4 minutes left. A little early for what we like, because usually you want to pull it within maybe 2 to a minute 30 left.
Right.
It didn't work out for them. They lost 7-4. The biggest surprise to me is Quinnipiac scored 4 goals.
Yeah.
I thought Michigan was going to be better than this. I had them picked rolling over Quinnipiac and not looking back. After seeing the St. Cloud State game of St. Cloud State's starting goalie did not have, or he had pneumonia, so they didn't have him in. And St. Cloud State loses when they double him up in shots. I expected Michigan to double up Quinnipiac in shots, and Quinnipiac outshot them.
That was 34-30.
And so the hype of being a powerhouse for Michigan is kind of wore off for me. I think Michigan is really going to struggle this next round because I believe they play our Denver University.
Yes, they do. Now, you had said that Michigan is a bunch of young kids.
Yep.
And if they could keep this team together for 4 years, the hard thing is that the NHL comes calling.
Yep.
And these kids leave early, and, you can't blame them, to get a chance to go and play and get paid for playing. But we got young kids against a pretty experienced DU game. But let's move on before we get to that game and preview that. Let's talk a little bit about Minnesota State Mankato and the North Dakota game, or Notre Dame. It was Notre Dame.
Yep, North Dakota was eliminated by Notre Dame in a close one, 2-1. Almost ended in regulation, but the goal was called back. Notre Dame still ended up getting it. Mankato, they're a little close to my heart. They're not far from my school, for St. Cloud State. We do have a little bit of a rivalry there. I think the most impressive thing about this Mankato team is the second Final Four in 2 years. They were here last year. They lost to St. Cloud State. I don't see it going that way from this year. Mankato's goalie, so we talk about the Mike Richter Award, which is what DU's goalie's up for.
Right, Corona.
Best goalie. But more impressively, Mankato's goalie is up for the Hobie Baker. That's the best player in all of college hockey.
That's rare, isn't that? You don't normally see a goalie up for the Hobie Baker
Yeah,
Award.
typically it usually goes to a forward, defenseman. I mean, I believe I have seen some goalies in there in nomination. But if you read who's won the Hobie Baker, it's typically Cale Makar is a Hobie Baker winner.
Right.
You have, I'm trying to remember some of the other ones. You have Drew LeBlanc from St. Cloud State back in the day, their only winner. But it's typically an offensive or defensive player. The fact that he's in there just proves of how great of a player he is. And you look at that score of that Mankato game, 1-0.
Yeah. Yeah, and the shots, Minnesota State was 13, and 7 for a total of 33. Notre Dame 6, 10, and 7 shots with 23 shots on goal.
And Mankato wasn't the most disciplined team in this game. You would think that there would be a little thing with Mankato taking 3 penalties compared to Notre Dame's 1. So you had 6 minutes on the power play and you still couldn't get one past this goalie. Mankato's going to be tough to beat, and they have a tough Minnesota team coming up, so we'll talk about their game.
Which is our next one up,
Yeah.
basically, that we're talking about. Minnesota versus Western Michigan. The game ended up Minnesota winning 3-0. The shots on goal were really even. Minnesota 26 and Western Michigan 24.
Well, and Minnesota's battle tested. I mean, they had the game against UMass in the first round that they were down. I believe it was 3-0 at one point. It was 3-1. Then all of a sudden Minnesota ties it up and they come back and win. So they know how to come back. They know how to bounce back when they start out slow. What I hate about this game is, so I had two scenarios that I really wanted. I wanted either an all Minnesota Final Four, which was set up, didn't happen.
Rooting against Denver.
Or an all
here.
NCHC, which, Denver's in there.
Yeah.
But with Western Michigan dropping out, I don't get to see either. Unfortunately, two Big Ten teams, which I'm not a big fan of this conference, because they left the WCHA, which made us create the NCHC. And you possibly have an all Big Ten championship coming here, which is great. But the Gophers are looking great. The Brzezinski brother didn't do anything in this game, but I mean, St. Cloud State has two brothers that play on U of M. So I was really hoping that we get to meet Minnesota in it. So it could be Brzezinski, and I can't remember the other. I think it's Parabix.
Okay.
The
Parabix brothers.
Which was great because, I mean, you look at how we talked about the NHL comes calling.
Right.
Already, Henrique, who did not play for St. Cloud State because he had pneumonia, he got called up to the LA Kings. Parabix got called up to go pro as well, and I believe there was a player from Duluth already called to make his NHL debut. So as soon as this tournament, as soon as your team's eliminated, the NHL pulls you up right away.
They don't wait long at all, do they? The last game, of course, is the DU game versus Minnesota Duluth, and this was the game that we were all just basically sitting on pins and needles here in Denver watching. The first period 1-1, second period no goals, and then DU kind of squeaks one out. One thing that I didn't like was the official that was behind the goal whistled two chances that DU had very early, whistled it dead.
Yep.
And that made it a little tough. I was thinking, boy, this is going to be a really rough loss for DU. And then luckily Connor Savoy pulls out kind of a haphazard kind of scrum kind of goal there at the very end.
Yeah. And I mean, the crazy thing, first of all, credit to the Minnesota Duluth goalie, getting outshot 10-2 in the first period, really weathering the storm at Denver, because this is where we talk about emotion. They've already played 5 times. This was the 6th time they met, because they met in the conference tournament, and Denver did not win that game.
Well, the shots on goal were 34 shots on goal for Duluth versus 25 for Denver.
And Denver came flying out, though. They came out, they were putting on, they remembered it. Duluth weathered the storm, and honestly, it could have gone either way. The biggest surprise to me with these two powerhouse teams is that between the two, there were 7 different power plays in this game. Not one goal scored on the power play.
Wow, that's interesting.
And these are one of the top power play schools. So you would think, in our last show, I did predict that it would be a 1-0, 2-1 game.
You did. You were right on.
But with 7 power plays, honestly, I could have seen it going 3-2. I could have seen 4-2. Because usually these teams capitalize on it, but it's a different stage. They're familiar with each other. Playing the 6th time of the year, that's just tough.
A lot of times to play in a college setting. I mean, we played a team one time 4 times. And you feel like the guys on the other team were your friends by the time you were done, because you played each other so many times. Well, it brings us to the Frozen Four, which is not going to be, again, held until April 7th is the first set of games. And the first game, which is at 5 o'clock Mountain Standard Time, is going to be Michigan versus DU. What do you see happening in this game? I mean, you got Michigan that's 31-9-1, and you've got DU that's 29-9.
So it's interesting because they play similar games. Both teams are possession-based. They love having the puck a lot. They love getting a lot of shots. Typically, it was uncharacteristic of Michigan to get outshot by Quinnipiac because they typically dominate the shot total. I believe when we went to the SCSU game, when we heard the last 8 games for DU, they were getting 45 shots to their opponents, like 20-25.
Yep.
So I think I'm giving the edge to DU, and that's not just because we're in Colorado. I think Michigan showed some vulnerability. Now, these young guys could turn around and play a completely different game. You never know with these young guys how they're going to show out. But I'm going to say DU wins, but it's going to be higher scoring. I'm going to go with like a 43-42 matchup that DU pulls this one off.
Well, good. We got to hope Magnus Corona shows up and that DU as a squad can get their shots in out of their big three. The second game, which will start right after the first one with a little bit of a warm-up for the skate, of course, is Minnesota State Mankato versus the Golden Gophers of Minnesota. So you've got 37-5 Minnesota State versus a Minnesota team which has a number of losses, and you can tell because they're young. Well, they're not the young team. That's Michigan's young team, but Minnesota's 26-12.
See, and I think there's a big thing with that. It's the same thing when you play those East Coast teams that have maybe almost like Quinnipiac, like almost a perfect record where they only had like 7 losses. It's the conference you're in. You got to realize Minnesota had to play Michigan 4 times this year. They had Michigan State, they had Wisconsin, they just had tougher competition. Mankato comes from Bemidji, Michigan Tech, nothing too fancy. But in this one, it's a big question mark for me because, you know, as much as Mankato's the higher seed, and I think they were the number 1 overall seed, but as much as it goes with Mankato, you're still the little brother of Minnesota. Same with St. Cloud State. We're all the little brother of the big school Minnesota Gophers. So this is always a rivalry game because we always want to prove that we're a little bit better than the bigger brother. And I could see Mankato pulling this one off in like a 2-1 win. But you know what? Part of me wants to see that Minnesota-Michigan matchup. I want to see, or Minnesota-DU, because I want to see the Gophers make it there because I want the best representation out of Minnesota. I think the Gophers, overall, minus Mankato's goalie, I think Minnesota's the better team.
You do. Interesting. Because, see, I was going to think, I picked it as going to be Minnesota State Mankato versus DU. That's what I'm hoping.
It could be. It could be because, I mean, Mankato made it this far last year, but we got to remember the Gophers made it this far last year. Last year, the Gophers lost to UMass, the team they beat first round. They lost them in the Final Four. So UMass went to the championship, and St. Cloud State eliminated Mankato. Right. So both these teams lost in the Frozen Four last year. So one's got to get over the hump eventually, and this is going to be the year it happens.
Okay. Well, there you heard it from Seth. I'm hoping for DU big time. I'd love to see us bring home a championship. The reason why is this: if we can get DU to bring home a championship, then maybe we've got the cup. You know, if the Avs can pull it off too.
You do run a little risk though. Winning the championship for these college players, depending on who they're drafted by, they may get the call earlier because what more is left for that college player to do once you won that championship? So you may see some turnover that we don't expect at DU. I don't expect a lot of players to leave DU, but the goalie, the Carter Savoy, also, you might be losing those top scorers once they win the championship.
Yeah, we'll have to watch and see, but that's a good point. All right, well, let's shift a little bit to basketball, since this is really, traditionally speaking, if you're a basketball fan, today is probably one of your top 3 days ever. At least it used to be for me way back, even in the 70s. Back then, of course, you know, if you got 2 basketball games you could watch in a row, it was really nice. They didn't cover the tournament kind of the way they do today. But before we move on, we should talk a little bit about the AP Player of the Year, this Oscar Shinnabaugh, and he played for Kansas, I believe. Or no, it wasn't Kansas, it was Kentucky. He's a junior, he's 6'9", 255 pounds, averaged 15.1 rebounds a game, and followed in with 17.4 points per game. He won the AP Player of the Year, and that was with Kentucky.
Yeah.
So,
and you're looking at pride right there. So we always talk about this. I talk about the Jones brothers from Duke. When you win things like that, it ends up making you go to the NBA draft early because this might be the highest stock that you've had all year.
Absolutely. Yeah, he's picked, I believe, to be in the top 5 or 6 for draft picks. He was followed up by Johnny Davis, a sophomore from Wisconsin, Keegan Murray from Iowa, and then Cockburn from Illinois were your top 4 college basketball players. Notice none from Duke.
Yep.
You know, and none from any of the Final Four teams that we've seen. So some of these kids, you know, it's nice to see that they are getting some recognition in their own respective conferences. The Duke, you know, we talked about the Final Four games, but a little bit of how it happened. You know, Duke played against Arkansas, and Arkansas just was not able to muscle Duke. You saw Duke really step up, and ended up winning 78-69. Again, you can't stress enough that someone woke up Duke, and I think they woke up somewhere right around that Texas Tech game in the final 16, the Sweet 16 game, and they're firing on all cylinders. It's going to be interesting to see what happens.
Yeah, this is a different Duke team than what I've seen in the past. In the back, we had like Zion Williams that kind of dominated the paint. We've had the Jones brothers that have come through. We've had the J.J. Redick, Shane Battiers. But there's really no, minus Banchero, there's no superstar.
No.
The ball is spread incredibly well.
And they're so young.
4 out of the 5 starters, they average over 10 points per game, which is rare to see. Ironically, UNC is built the exact same way, so we'll get into that one in a minute. But I think Duke's depth is what saved them in the Arkansas game, because Arkansas dominated the paint in the first half. Duke looked like they were on the ropes, but this team, it's Coach K's last year. There had to be something said at halftime. They turned it on and shot. They keep going on and shooting like 80% in like second halves. The first half, they don't come out that strong.
No, you saw Roach really step it up too. And watch for Roach. He's a gentleman who lost his starting position in the beginning of February, but is somebody who's really coming on and ended up being a regional MVP leading into this game. So, it seems kind of the way that he goes a lot of times is the way that Duke goes.
Yeah.
So look for that early, especially when we talk about this Duke Carolina
And he's
game.
only a sophomore.
Yes, he is. He's young. Houston versus Nova. Again, we needed Houston, who really needed to play an up-tempo game. I should have taken the over or the under in this game because it ended up being 50-44. Nova ended up pulling it out. It was a really slow game, which played in the hands of Villanova. Houston just, the Cinderella slipper, I guess, that was it for them.
Well, and the big thing with you running into these teams, Michigan State hasn't been this way in a while, but I remember when they were a 3-point team and they lived and died by the 3. That's kind of where Houston was leading into this game, where, if they were on point, hitting their threes, they were going to win this game.
Yeah, their big 3 did not show up that well.
At all. They really just went ice cold. And, Villanova's a veteran team, so they were ready to play. They are a quiet powerhouse in college basketball. They're always sitting near that top 10 spot, but they never are the teams we're talking about. We're always talking about the Dukes, the Kansas, and everybody. So this Villanova team is built well, and they could definitely make a run to make it to the finals.
Yeah, it hurts that they lost Justin Moore to that ACL.
Yep.
That was really they traditionally every time Villanova has won the national championship, which was in 2016 and 2018, they had 2 powerhouse players. So they're playing without that. But it's funny, and we'll talk a little bit about the Kansas game. But Vegas has Kansas and Villanova one way, and ESPN and some of the power rankings has them going the opposite direction. We'll talk about that in just a moment.
I feel like ESPN's a little delayed. Vegas alters everything based on bets and based on everything like that. ESPN does not factor in well when players are out. It's what kills me when I bet on the NBA, because I'll look at ESPN and they have a little match predictor. And you'll look and it'll say, hey, 70% for the Sixers.
Yeah.
Okay, so I'm going to bet on the Sixers because it says they're not favored on Vegas for some reason. Then the game starts, and ESPN never factored in Joel Embiid and Harden both aren't playing that day.
Oh,
and so
interesting.
ESPN is a little delayed on factoring in injuries and people being out. But Vegas, they have to be on top of it because as soon as you hear it, that affects their money and everybody else's money. So Vegas is a little quicker in factoring in the injuries.
Well, interesting. See, and that's good. And that's another reason we did the sports betting show a couple episodes back. It's been almost 2 months now. But Seth is our resident betting champion. And, of course, he talks to Spencer, who works here as well, who's an ex-Division II player for St. Cloud State. And that gentleman, he's like Jimmy the Greek of the betting.
Yeah, he's really good at basketball betting. Another good one is Colton, who's downstairs right now working. He's really good at picking these hockey games. He's usually about 90% correct on every NHL.
No kidding. I'm going to start talking to Colton. Well, you have Kansas versus Miami, and again, we talked a little bit about Miami's experience. Unfortunately, for Miami, Kansas just rolled over them 76-50. And I think we really got a chance to see how good Kansas really is.
Well, and that one played a little bit differently because Kansas had that young X factor where they could turn it on at any time.
Remy Martin.
The transfer. And then you have Miami, who's super experienced. They just they're in one gear, and that's what they are. They play solid basketball, and they're great. But they don't really have that X factor of turning it on. And you know what? First half, Miami had the lead. Miami looked like they might take it.
They needed it to be more of a playground kind of play where they were just going to up-tempo and get Kansas out of their half-court offense. Mm-hmm. Unfortunately, once you get Kansas in that half-court offense, it's really hard to beat them.
Yeah, and Kansas really turned it on that second half. There was no looking back. I actually placed a bet on Kansas when they were down that they were going to come back and win. Now, did I expect 20-point win? Definitely not. But this Kansas team, honestly, has got to be favored to win the whole thing. Even though I'm rooting for the storybook ending for Coach K, I think this Kansas team is making a run, and this is their year.
If Kansas wins another game, I will win one of my pools I'm in. Can you believe it? And that just shows you how many other pools got messed up, because my pool is the worst in 40 years. The game we didn't talk about too much here is the North Carolina versus St. Peter's. Unfortunately, the Cinderella slipper broke. She fell down the stairs and ended up in a mud puddle face down.
Yeah, St. Peter's was cocky. My favorite story about this game, which I'll get into here in a second. Let's talk about the game first of all. UNC was just better. They're a better program. They have the 5-star recruits. It was only a matter of time before it caught up with St. Peter's that they don't have the 5-star recruits. Very well coached, played a great tournament. But you know what? Hats off to them. It's the farthest that any 15 seed has ever made in the tournament.
Yes.
Now, here's my favorite part of this story. The interview with the coach after they won their previous game was like, this is what we do. We're the best. I'm here for St. Peter's. As soon as they lost that game, he signed a contract and left St. Peter's. He was an alumni for Seton Hall.
Yes,
he was the assistant coach, I believe, for 8 or 9 years. Never could get the head coaching job.
Right.
He cashed in early. As soon as he won St. Peter's, he is now the head coach of Seton Hall, which is probably his dream job.
It is, and he brought his whole team with him.
Yep.
While he accepted. All of his teammates, and he gave them a standing ovation before he accepted the position. And in this game, you know, in this arena of things, you can't fault a coach for taking an opportunity and taking a dream.
No, it's the same with the players.
What's interesting, though, we'll have to see, Seth, how many of these St. Peter's players will enter the transfer portal and come with him?
I don't think very many. I mean, at the end of the day, you're going to a little bit better of a program.
A lot better.
You're already getting in. Let's just go, for example, let's just assume his St. Peter's were 3-star recruits.
Right.
If you're at Seton Hall, you're probably getting 4. Now, are you getting the 5? Maybe not. But you're getting better recruits. They're going to be younger. Are you going to? Maybe he'll bring one guy with him.
Maybe you're
but
right.
I don't think he's going to bring a lot of people because recruiting's completely different in the realm he's in. He's in a different conference. Things are about to get tougher for him. I wish him the best.
Yeah.
I think he's a great coach, and I think he really can make Seton Hall make a couple runs. Now, first year, what do we give him? 3 years?
Yeah, that takes you to build a program properly without your one and dones. It'll take about 3 years to build a program.
Yeah, so I think he's going to make Seton Hall. Seton Hall's always been kind of up there, like on the verge of making the tournament.
Yeah,
I think he can make him a little bit more consistent.
They play in the Big East, which is a really good conference and stuff like that. But I kind of know how these St. Peter's players feel. I remember when I was in high school, Jim Calhoun told me, I'm leaving Northeastern, I'm going to UConn, and I go, oh, cool, UConn. And he goes, well, you're not invited.
Yep.
And, I just wasn't on that level to be able to play in the Big East. And I took my medicine, and I was going to go play at Vermont, which is a little bit lower Division I school. And that didn't work out either. I ended up Division II because the coaches kept leaving.
Well, and that's also good tribute to, like, it's not that, like, they don't like you. Like, the coach-player relationship's always great.
Oh, yeah.
But also, it's the coach's job on the line here, where these players will be done in 4 years. Either they go pro or whatever. They have other places to be. But they're not like the Coach K's and Roy Williams. They will be there for 30, 40 years. So he needs to build his own dynasty. So that's why I don't think he's going to take a lot of players from St. Peter's. I think he's going to do a lot of recruiting. Seton Hall probably already had a bunch of commitments already. And kind of look what he has and develop the players he's got.
Yeah. I mean,
it's not like football.
No, but Calhoun was on it. He basically said to me, he goes, Jimbo, you're going to end up sitting. You may play a little bit your junior, senior year, but don't you want to play? I mean, you only have 4 years left of eligibility. Go play somewhere where you're going to, see some light. So, all right. Well, that brings us to the final 4 games. And the first game, of course, will kick off today, and it will tip off today at 6:09, 4:09 actually, 6:09 Eastern time.
Mm-hmm.
And we've got Villanova versus Kansas. Villanova, the biggest problem with Villanova is they have really no depth.
Mm-hmm.
So if they get into foul issues, if you see them up high, and some kid gets into foul trouble, 3 or 4 fouls, know that they only have about 4 or 5 guys, and most of them play about 35 plus minutes.
Well, let's not forget about Moore. You mentioned it earlier.
Yep.
He tore his Achilles. He's the second leading scorer of Villanova. A big part of
loss.
that team.
Big loss.
They were a team that's all or nothing. You need everybody. Everybody has to be on the court. If you deal with any injuries, this team's talent level drops significantly.
Yep. And then you've got one thing good for them. If you watch down the stretch, if it's close and this becomes a foul shooting contest between the two teams, look for Villanova to have the actual edge because they do shoot foul shots much better than Kansas. Kansas, again, we talked about Remy Martin.
Yeah, transfer student from Arizona State.
Exactly. He's a feast or famine kind of guy. So if he's on, look out. If he's playing horrible, then we'll have to reevaluate and see exactly what happens.
Well, and he's been coming off the bench, and when he comes off the bench, he's averaging about 17 points per game, which is huge to have a bench player averaging that.
And he was the regional player of the year of the tournament there.
The biggest stat I see in Kansas's favor, so I think of Kansas, Kentucky, Duke, North Carolina, like a lot of one and dones. That's not the case with this Kansas team this year. Kansas has 2 players. One is Jalen Coleman, Ians, who's played 170 games.
Wow.
And then they have Lightfoot, who's just 4 games behind him. And then you have Kansas All-American Ochai Agbaji.
It's Agbaji, yeah. He's so hard. It's so hard to say that name.
He's in his 120th game.
That's amazing.
So you have so much talent. You have such a quick team. And you have 3 guys that have basically played more than any college basketball player will probably
even
play
more
in
than the
their career.
Miami guys.
Yeah.
Because they were 150 plus.
Yeah.
So 170 games, okay? Divide that by 4, okay? And think about how many games that kid has played per year. And a lot of that had to do with, we're in a very weird time right now because of COVID and having super seniors.
Well, and that's the
stuff
reason
like
why
that.
Coleman and all them got to play up to 170th
Yes.
and whatever. When the COVID year happened, they filed for a petition to get another year, and they got their other year.
Yeah. Yep.
So they'll be gone after this year, but this is a very talented Kansas team that has the seniority. They have the young guys. They're a perfect balance. Is why I have Kansas in the finals over Villanova, since Villanova ended up losing more.
Yep, and I do too. I have Nova winning this. Now, Kansas winning this. Nova is a 4.5 point underdog. So I think that I'm going with Kansas this game.
Oh, yeah.
Now, this next game is a game for the ages. You've got UNC versus Duke. Not only are they only 11 miles apart from each other, or 8 miles apart from each other, I can't remember what the distance is, but you've got 2 teams that are just they hate each other.
Yeah.
Talk about a rivalry. We talked a little bit about Duke and Roach coming up and starting to play pretty well. There was an incident in the Texas Tech game that everybody's kind of looking at, and it was a time where Roach went in and was fouled really hard by a Texas Tech player, Bryson Williams, and all of a sudden something clicked. And this is where Coach K feels like, hey, I think we turned a corner. The team has not been the same team since then. And so it should be pretty interesting. Now, UNC, you've got Love and Davis. If they don't shoot well, if these 2 guards for North Carolina don't shoot well, look for Duke to win by 10 plus points.
Well, I see Duke as the better team here. So earlier in the season they met, Duke won by 20.
Yes.
Duke may have lost that last game on Coach K night, and that was embarrassing for this team. 81 alumni were in those stands that night, and we're talking about Hall of Fame NBA players in the stands.
Yeah.
Duke was up by 12 in the second half with not a lot of time left, and they ended up losing by 10. There was a complete meltdown of the game.
Yeah.
Coach K was very disappointed. I'm sure he had a few choice words for his players.
Oh, but he had even better choice players for his 81 alumni that were standing there. And I love this, is he took to them and he goes, we didn't play well tonight. but there were many nights when you didn't either.
Yep.
And I thought that was a great line.
But you look at this team, they haven't forgotten. This is like within 3 weeks that this loss had happened, and Duke has been nonstop on going since. They did have the loss in the ACC championship, which is fine, against a team that, was probably a lesser team, especially once they got into the tournament. They didn't make a lot of noise. But you're looking at Wendell Moore Jr., who's a big guy. He's a junior. He's probably the oldest guy on this roster. Followed by AJ Griffin, who's a freshman, Pablo Banchero, who's a freshman, Mark Williams, who's a sophomore. Now, these 4 players all average over 10 points a game. This team is very distributed. Then you have Jeremy Roach, sophomore, coming out of the bench. I believe he is starting. I think he's back into a starting role now.
He may be. They haven't really announced if he's going to be starting or not.
But he's the only player not averaging 10 points a game that's on the starting. Right. So when you look at this Duke team, it can come from anywhere. They don't rely on one player. They play great team ball. They understand they messed up. And I'm going to see, I think it's going to be Duke's best performance that they have put on all year against this UNC team.
Well, good. This is a good game because Seth and I have $20 on this game. I'm getting 4 points, thank God. But I'm still thinking that I think these young kids are going to come out and in a game that there's a lot of pressure.
Yep.
We saw what happened with them against North Carolina in that last game of the season. The pressure may have gotten to them down the stretch. I've been a lifelong Carolina fan, UNC fan. It's really hard for me to root for Duke, but I'm going out on a limb here, putting $20 where my mouth is, and I'm going to go with UNC. Let's see what happens.
Well, see, my thing with UNC, now they are very similar to Duke, and this is what I said earlier, is their players actually average a little bit more. 4 out of their 5 also average over 10 points, and they're built very much alike. But the big thing with UNC that I don't like is I'm waiting for the other shoe to drop. Look at their 9 losses. A majority of them are by double digits. And a lot of them, like I would say at least half the losses have been by about 20 points.
Right.
So we're looking at when they don't show up, they really don't show up.
Yeah, and we'll know that in the first half.
Mm-hmm.
We really will. And like I said, really look at the guards. Look for Love, Davis, and also Manic. If these guys are not hitting their shots from the outside, it is going to be a long day for Carolina, a very long day.
Well, keep an eye on Paolo Banchero. I think they've gotten the cramping down, but if he's on the court the whole time and he doesn't get in foul trouble, he has the capability. Him and Wendell Moore Jr. on the court at the same time are an unstoppable duo.
That is tough. We'll have to see if they can maybe they'll get in foul trouble or something like that. I mean, wishful thinking on my part.
That really changes the game. We look at when Duke beat Gonzaga. Do I think Duke deserved to win that game? It was actually a really back and forth game, but the only reason why was because Holmgren and Jeff Timms went in foul trouble in the first half to give Duke that lead. Exactly. So Duke held on. So, things happen in a game that you can't control.
Yep.
We'll have to see how UNC comes out. But
well, traditionally in the Final Four games, you see the refs are a little bit less, they're not real prone to blow their whistle.
Yeah.
And so we hope we let the kids play a little bit. So it'll be interesting, on Monday night we'll see the winner of Kansas Villanova versus Duke UNC. Who do you think? Now you think you're going with Duke and Kansas.
Yep.
And I'm going to say UNC and Kansas. So we'll have to see which one of us is right.
Yeah, both good games. I mean, the only thing I got to criticize the college basketball refs for, and I don't know when this happened, and I've seen it a little bit in pros, when did we get so sensitive on fouls? Now, I get the targeting in football, but if somebody barely comes down, and we're even seeing it at the pro level, basketball fouls are getting real soft. Did you see the Denver Nuggets, who was it? I believe it was Austin Rivers. He had the ball, didn't even touch the guy, but it barely touched him, but kind of shook the ball, ejected, flagrant 1, because they said he made contact to the head.
Interesting. No, I didn't see that, but I did see Jokovic had a really outstanding night last night, 38 points, ended up double figure in boards and just missed a triple-double by 3 assists.
Well, and Vegas is on the Jokic bandwagon right now.
Oh, they've got him for the MVP.
They went from not favored, I believe he was 2nd or 3rd, to going to almost number 1 but was still plus, to after 2 nights ago, I want to say, they changed him to favorite to win the MVP.
Oh, big time. And that'd be 2 in a row for the Joker, which would be just wonderful.
Which he deserves it. He's missing 2 none of these other players are really missing their superstars with them. He doesn't have Jamal Murray. He doesn't have Michael Porter Jr. And he's doing it all himself and willing the Nuggets into a playoff spot.
Yeah.
So I really like that they're recognizing that, like, even though the Nuggets aren't number one in the NBA, that this guy is just creating and really carrying the Nuggets on his back.
Could you imagine if Porter and Murray were back? We would be talking potential NBA championship here.
Yeah.
It's really sad how injuries can really affect a team like that, because this was really, I mean, people were talking preseason that we had a really good shot. I mean, we didn't know what was going to happen with Murray. Unfortunately, both of them have had setbacks in their rehabs, so they're still questionable for the playoffs.
Yeah.
So one of the things I want to mention too, and Seth and I talked about this a little bit before the show, unfortunately down in LSU, you've got 11 players out of the 12 that were on the roster now that have entered the transfer portal. Mm-hmm. And, again, it's recruiting violations, which I haven't had a chance to really look into yet, but LSU just dismissed their coach really quickly, right, as soon as the tournament started. And so there's a lot of fallout there. Another thing, too, is the AP Coach of the Year, Tommy Lloyd from Arizona. Remember, he's a first-year coach. He was the assistant coach at Gonzaga, came down and really did a real wonderful job with an Arizona team that really had an early out. There's two other coaches, Bill Hodges, and some of you may remember Bill Hodges. He was a first-year coach for Indiana State back in 1979, Larry Bird's senior year. Unfortunately, they came to the final game, and Larry Bird lost to Magic Johnson's Michigan State team, and that really is what a lot of people think ushered in the modern NBA when Bird and Magic came into the league. The other person, and you probably don't know this name, but Keno Davis from Drake in 2008 got the Coach of the Year. He was a first-year player, or first-year coach. He's then gone on to Providence for 3 years, and he's at Central Michigan. But hats off to Tommy Lloyd in your first season down there at Arizona. Let's hope that you can put together a squad that's more of your players next year and continue to do good success.
Well, and that's the other thing you got to remember. So even though I think he deserves Coach of the Year, we're also running into these aren't his players. What we always talk about is you get 3 years to get your players in. Do I think Duke's going to fall off the face of the earth once Coach K's gone? Not right away. Same with UNC. This is Roy Williams' first season gone. They haven't fallen off the face of the earth. Now, if he can maintain, he'll get some really good recruits.
Well, there's continuity. See, the same thing happened at UNC that's going to happen at Duke. Mm-hmm. The player or the coach is going to be Shire, which is an ex-player for Mike Krzyzewski. So a lot of the people that you've been recruiting, and again, these top-tier programs start recruiting kids in 8th and 9th grade. So they establish relationships with these kids when they're 13, 14, 15 years old. Mm-hmm. As long as there's continuity in the program, it's not so hard for a player to just say, well, heck, I'm not going to go play at Duke because Coach K's gone.
Yep.
I'm going to go play for John Shire. Same thing happened with North Carolina. Well, we'll see what happens with Tommy Lloyd down there, but he's definitely off to a great start.
Yep.
All right. You know, we were talking a little about soccer in the World Cup.
Yep.
And the first thing, we were talking about this Mohamed Salah for Egypt. And if any of you saw this, there was a penalty kick.
It was a shootout.
It was a shootout.
Yep.
Okay, so it was a shootout, and we're looking at it right now. This poor guy ended up with 50, 25, 30, 50 lasers on his face while he was trying to make the shot. Well, what did you feel like? Did you feel like maybe the ref should have stopped in and said, we can't have lasers, or how would you stop something like that?
When you're in a big stadium like that, I mean, it's the same thing when it comes to hockey blowing the whistle too early. It's whatever the ref can see. So now maybe he's looking at the goalie, maybe he's looking somewhere else. Maybe he's not paying attention to the player's face when you're watching the shoot. Because if the goalie leaves early, it's a foul. Like they get a reshoot. If the player stops progress going forward, the shot's automatically canceled,
right.
And it didn't happen. So he's looking at a lot of other things. Now, do I think that FIFA should step in? I think this would be a good time to show in and say, hey, fans can't do this. You cost your team the game. But another thing I was really surprised by, Mohamed, he didn't go up to the ref and say anything.
No.
I instantly would have stopped my shot and said, hey, look up there. Look at all these things coming on my face. Like, I can't see to shoot. You either need to make that stop or, give us the goal.
Yeah.
But he took the shot. He missed. His team lost.
He took his medicine and he didn't complain. And unfortunately, Egypt is not going to qualify for the World Cup because of it, correct?
I don't believe they have a backdoor chance in. I see that there's still some. They released the groups yesterday, and I don't have them all. I don't have them all memorized. The only team I focused on in the United States bracket is we get to play our older brother in soccer. We get to play good old England.
Oh, boy.
Last time we met in the World Cup, I believe, was 8 to 12 years ago, and we beat them 1-0.
Okay.
And so, you know what? This United States team is very interesting because they've won some really big games. They have played really well. And then
they lost to Costa Rica and they backed in, right?
Yeah, they crapped the bed against that because that game was handed to them.
Right.
Costa Rica decided to sit 9 of 11 starters because they all had yellow cards. Now, if they get another yellow, they're kicked out of the tournament. They didn't want to lose the players, so their backup squad was in. And we sent our starters and lost 2-0. This is a better scenario, though. I honestly don't mind it as much as the last World Cup because we had beaten Trinidad and Tobago. We went to their field last World Cup when it was raining. The field conditions were bad. We lost. We didn't even qualify for the World Cup last time.
That was terrible.
So I'm just glad that we're back in it. I think there's a very good chance that we get out of our group and can get to elimination stages. Are we going to win the World Cup? Most likely not.
No.
But we're going to be there.
Yes, absolutely. Well, what else has got going on? Some of the other things that may have struck you this week. Anything going on in the NFL or anything like that you can think of?
NFL's been interesting. Minnesota State has made a lot of acquisition. Patrick Peterson just got re-signed, which I didn't think was going to happen. They've really been quietly signing a defense, which, in my opinion, has been the biggest issue with Minnesota since we've gotten Kirk Cousins. We did give him a lot of money, and we had a great offense. We were scoring 28 to 30-some points a game, but we were giving up like 40 points a game.
Yeah.
So I think O'Connell has a great system in place. I think he's going to be very successful. Unless I see Green Bay get like DK Metcalf or somebody like astronomical on their team.
Stephen Gilmore from he's up, or Stephon Gilmore from the Patriots.
He just re-signed there.
Did he re-sign?
Yeah, so he's there.
He left the Patriots and then he went to a different team.
Now he's back with the Patriots.
He is back with the Patriots.
So he just signed a one-year deal. So
I was hoping the Steelers would get him.
So we're sitting with Minnesota looking actually pretty good at winning their division this year, which would be great. Love to see them in the playoffs. Again, Super Bowl, probably not. But you know what? We're going to be in the playoffs, which is all Minnesota fans ask for. Looks like the Timberwolves are going to make the playoffs. We're just happy to be there.
What's the latest on Brittany Griner? Have you heard anything else about?
Honestly, she hasn't gotten any news coverage really lately. I heard they were working on getting her out. They extended her stay in whatever jail she was in. But with everything going on in the world, we're just seeing it. It's very hard to deal with Russia to get people out. They're focusing on Ukraine. And we're focusing on Ukraine, so she's kind of an afterthought until that settles down, is my opinion.
I agree. Now, we had mentioned back when Seth was in his bachelor party in Vegas a little bit about Cheyenne Shorts and her team over in Scotland. We're going to do an interview with her either the first or second week after the NCAA tournament, probably after the Frozen Four. We'll see if we can get her mother to come up here, and we'll get her on the phone and talk to her a little bit what it's like to be in women's soccer at a professional level over in the UK.
Mm-hmm. That'd be awesome.
That'd be really neat to talk to her. Well, excellent. Well, we want to invite you to come down. Today is a beautiful day here in Denver, Colorado. It's supposed to be 70-something degrees. We have a wraparound patio here at Brothers Bar and Grill at the Shops of Northfield. Seth, what do we got going on? Any kind of huge specials for drinks and stuff like that?
Yes, we just changed them. It's a new month. Right now, I believe we're doing Corona bottles for $5. We're doing Modelo's for $6. Our shot special is a white gummy bear shot.
Gummy bear, right on.
And they're delicious.
What's in that shot? Tell me.
So that's a little bit of raspberry vodka, a little bit of peach schnapps, a little bit of sour, and a little bit of creamer. It tastes exactly like a white gummy bear.
White gummy bear.
The big thing going on today is obviously we have our basketball games, but you know what? We didn't really talk about soccer that much, but our home Colorado Rapids are here today against Houston, and they will be playing, I believe, at 6 or 7 o'clock today. So we have the pregame and the postgame here after the game.
Yes.
So along with March Madness, we have a home MLS game for our Colorado Rapids, who are sitting in right now it's real early, so you know what, I'll say it anyways.
Sure.
We're sitting at the top of the division. We're not like number one, but we're in like the top half. Last year we did a great run. But you know, the Rapids, they're doing better than I expected. We traded away our captain, sold him to, I believe, one of the LA teams. I can't remember if it was Galaxy. I think it was the RFC team for something about $1.5 million. And this young Rapids team is looking like they're up to the test without him. So we have nothing but good things going on. And don't forget, next week, home opener, we have the LA Dodgers coming to town against the Rockies.
Yes. Oh, and we got to mention a little bit of golf, too. I mean, it's Masters week.
Is Tiger going to play?
I don't know. I know that there was some speculation. They walked up to him, and he was playing a practice round. He and his son Charlie flew in, I believe, on Monday. And he kind of smiled. They go, "So, Tiger, are you playing the par 3?" And that's a traditional tournament on Wednesdays for the week of the Masters. You golf fans out there know about it. And Tiger kind of just half smiled and just walked to the back on the first tee. So, I don't know. You know, I think there's not a tournament that Tiger wouldn't want to play more than this Masters. But will he be able to hold up with the elevation? There's such huge elevation changes at Augusta National. It's going to be so hard on him to be able to walk it for 4 days straight.
So I think the 4 days thing is the thing that is the question mark. But he did play all 18. So he was there. He played the course. Yep. So he did get through the whole course. From what I heard, there isn't anything of like complications of him feeling sore the next day, him feeling super fatigued. So that is why the speculation is there, like, oh, you feel good the next day?
Yeah.
Does that mean you can play in the tournament? And you know what? Even if Tiger would have finished dead last, I'll watch the whole thing with as long as he's playing, because
you really like watching him.
Yeah, Tiger's my favorite player to watch out of anybody. I watched him as a kid. Yeah. Even with him not winning, I make sure every time he's playing I have the TV on.
Yeah, and my favorite player, Phil, of course, is not playing. He's opted out of the Masters. This is kind of what I was afraid of with all the controversy. But Phil needs to get healthy first mentally, and if that's what he's doing, then more power to Phil, and hopefully he can keep his feet out of his mouth and just kind of move forward and have a decent tournament. Remember, he's 52 years old, so he is eligible for the senior tournament. Maybe he'll pick up some senior events. Who knows?
Yeah, but then he'll dominate. I think he's still got enough to be with the young kids.
Yeah.
So.
Well, we'll see. I mean, we'll have to wait and see if he, you know, what kind of goes down and how his mental state is. Now, you had just mentioned about opening day. Mm-hmm. Opening day for baseball in Colorado is probably one of the top 3 days that you can be in Denver, Colorado. The entire downtown is just packed with people, and you can't get a ticket. I mean, tickets sometimes go for like $200 to $300 to $400 by the time the game starts. I traditionally go down for the party, enjoy, and then I like to just go to a sports bar or a couple sports bars and watch the game.
Well, and with opening day, let's just be honest. We don't go there to see a win because it's not happening. We're playing the Dodgers, who's probably going to win the World Series. We follow that up with the Cubs right after that, which is going to be just packed. Cubs fans travel really well. So we're looking at probably a 10-day party, which is great. But you know what? Like, go on down. We have a Brothers downtown. There's a bunch of events going on.
Exactly.
Make sure you pack it. It's just going to be a great time.
Yep, and if you're downtown at the Brothers downtown, don't forget to ask for Easton. He's an ex-bartender, now manager down there. He's a great person to talk to, and he will tell you so many sports factoids. Just ask him, and he will talk to you.
Just make sure when you walk up to him, you tell him Baltimore sucks.
Yeah, Baltimore Ravens suck. Yeah, that's a great way to open.
Yep. Say, hey, are you
sure to get
Baltimore
you a really
Ravens
short
suck.
Well, excellent. Well, once again, we'll be here at Brothers for the rest of the afternoon. Come on down for these drink specials, these gummy bear shots. And anything else, Seth? Take us out.
Yeah, no, come on down. The weather's supposed to be perfect. We're looking at in the 70s this whole weekend. And then when you're recovering, come down on Sunday. We have bottomless mimosas until 2 o'clock to help with your hangover, and $5 Bloody Marys. And, you know, we just got some amazing food here. We always have that. Some amazing burgers. We're a Wisconsin bar, so we have the cheese curd burger with a world famous cheese curds on top of it, and you got to try the gator balls, which are just amazing.
Oh my goodness, I forgot about the gator balls. Haven't had them in a while. Might have to have them today. All right, folks. Well, thank you very much for tuning in. Remember, you can find us on YouTube. Okay, you can find us on Spotify. Don't be afraid. People have said that had a little trouble just typing in sports shows. just remember to put in Dr. Jimbo Love Show featuring Seth Matthews. But if you get to the point where you're past the Dr. Jimbo Love, just go on to YouTube if you can't find us. I know that I punch us in 2 or 3 times a week just to make sure that we're coming up on Google. Just go into Google, you'll find us, and watch some of our old shows if you want. Hopefully you'll be able to catch up on some of the older stuff that we've talked about. But it shouldn't be that tough to find us. All right, folks, remember, get out there this week and earn it. We'll see you next week, folks.
See you, everybody.